right. Well, hopefully everyone got some good gratitudes written down. I saw a couple there in the chat box, and I appreciate the birthday wishes. That was my birthday was on Sunday, and it was awesome. So I am grateful for the birthday wishes from you guys that sent those. All right. Well, here's what we're going to do. I actually just noticed my computer battery says it's at 34%. So we're going to get through my information, or we're going to go until my battery dies. And then if all of a sudden I just disappear, you guys will know what happened. So I think it'll be okay though. All right, here's what I want to talk about today is I was thinking about yesterday, just that it has been a while since we have really talked a whole lot about the listing presentation. And typically we will talk quite a bit about the listing presentation because ultimately that is where you're going to want to be getting to is I always think about the business as working like this. As a new agent, typically, and again, as I'm saying this, not always is this the case, but for the most part, what I have found is for most agents, it works better to start with working with buyers because typically your skills do not have to be as high to convert and get a buyer to work with you as they do on the selling side. And so typically what will happen is an agent will start out, if you think of it as a pendulum swinging, of usually you're going to start out as a newer agent with more buyers being what your transactions are going to consist of. But over time, we want that pendulum to swing to where you're doing mostly listings, because it typically your listing side is where most of the top agents are doing more listings than they are buyers. And so think of it as being this process of we're going to start out with the buyers and over time slowly have this pendulum swing over to the listing side, which is generally what happens. Now, with that being said, I have watched many agents come into the business and just hit the ground running where they're doing a ton of listings right off the bat, which is great. But so I want to talk to you today about specifically the listing presentation, but I'm going to give you actually 6 things that have to happen in every presentation. So it really doesn't matter if we're talking about a listing presentation or a buyer presentation. These 6 things have to happen in order for you to get them to choose you and to use you as their agent. So I'm going to write up here on the board of specifically though, talking about a listing presentation. There are 2 things that have to happen, and I apologize, there's probably a little bit of a glare. So I will tell you what I'm writing on the board as I write these things down, just in case you can't see them. But even if you can see them, you probably can't read my handwriting anyway, so it doesn't matter really so much that there is a glare there. But here's what I want to do is to go through and to talk with you about is the first thing that has to happen in any presentation, but again, specifically a listing presentation, is the first thing that's got to happen is you have got to get them to choose you. So I've written on the board, choose me. So that's the first thing that's got to take place in any presentation that you do. And now I said I'm going to give you 6 things, and what I've put up here is not one of the 6. What we're going to talk about is the 6 things that have to happen in order for them to choose you. So the first one is that the first thing that's got to happen on this side is in a listing presentation, the seller has to be willing to choose you first. Then after that, together, we can talk about the price. I'm not sure that that's any better of a marker. So Rick's trying to hand me markers to use, but yeah, there we go. That one looks better. Okay, so there's 2 parts to the listing presentation. The first part is you got to get them to be willing to choose you. And then after that, we will talk about price with them. So here's the thing, in terms of a listing presentation, or even just in terms of your prospecting, when you are prospecting and somebody asks you, well, what do you think the price of my house should be? Or what's the commission you're going to charge me? That would fall under this price side. And when you are doing a listing presentation, or as I said, you're on the phone making contacts and asking for an appointment, specifically if it was with a for sale by owner or an expired, but it could be any type of prospecting, and they ask you, what is your commission going to be? Until they have chosen you, you don't want to talk price with them. So you need to use some type of an objection handler or some type of a script to be able to get around or past that when they're saying to you, well, what's your commission going to be? Because I'm only going to pay a 2% or a 3% or 4%. Or I want to use a discount broker. Whatever it is that they are going to say that way, you then need to be able to handle that by keeping in mind for yourself, you do not want to talk about the price until they have chosen you first. So when they say, well, what's the commission going to be? How much do you charge? You need to have some type of an answer. The one I like to use is this. Until we have had a chance to sit down and talk about it, I can't tell you for sure what the commission is going to be, but I will tell you this. It could be as low as 0, but it might also be as high as 10%. We just need to sit down and talk through what makes the most sense for you and what is going to help you accomplish what it is you want to accomplish. And then from there, we will work together and come to an agreement on a commission that we're both happy with. How does that sound? And then they're going to say, okay, that makes sense. Now let's get together and talk about it. Now that we're together and we're going to start talking about the process or doing the listing presentation, then I've got to get them to first choose me. Because if you start to talk price with them prior to them choosing you, then in their mind, we're all the same. It doesn't matter. You as an agent, it doesn't matter. They don't see you as being any different than a discount broker. You are no different in their mind until they have chosen you. And so as a result of that, because they have chosen you, they will be willing to look at and talk about the price and the commission that you're going to charge. But until then, until you have had the chance for them to realize you are the agent that they want to work with, in their mind, every agent out there is the same. So because of that, they might as well choose the agent who has the lowest commission. But once you have shown them otherwise and they've chosen you, now we can get them to be willing to pay our commission. So the first thing that has to happen in order for them to choose me. So keeping in mind, 2 parts to a listing presentation, choose me, then together we talk price. The way that we're going to get them to choose us is first through, we have to have some rapport, or we could say it as a connection. You've got to create a connection or have some rapport. So that's what number 1 that I've written down is there's got to be some rapport built. You have to have created a connection with them in order for them to be willing to choose you. Well, now how do you do that? The way that you're going to create this connection with them, the way you're going to create rapport with these clients is what you have to do is be asking a lot of questions and asking questions that are more about them than they are about you. See, a lot of times what will happen is we will hear somebody say something about they have 3 kids. And we want to be like, oh, well, I have 3 kids. And then we start talking about our 3 kids instead of finding out more about them. That connection and rapport is making them feel important. The way that you do that is asking questions about them and getting them to talking about and telling you about them and their scenario and what it is that they are trying to accomplish. See, if you will make it about them, then you're going to be okay. But again, too many times what happens is we as an agent get on the phone, we're prospecting, and they bring up something that we have in common, and we start talking about commonalities. Well, commonalities is not the same thing as having this connection or this rapport. You don't have to have things in common. You just have to make them feel important. Let them feel like you care about them and that you understand them. And when you do that, that will create this connection and the rapport that you need to have happen, which is the first step in having them then choose you. Then number 2, the second thing that we've got to have take place in order for them to be willing to choose me is, so first is a connection and rapport. Second is I have to allow them to feel safe. They need to feel safe. So that's the second word that's written down is they've got to feel safe with you. They've got to feel like that if they were to work with you, they are going to feel safe. They don't have to be worried about what is going to happen and are you really going to be there to help them, those type of things along the way. And again, part of where this comes from again is through this asking the questions that are about them, finding out what is important about them. And as you find out what is important to them, then that allows you to have them feel safe because they are listening to you. So let me give you a quick story on this, which leads to then the number 3 thing. When I was first learning this process was back in 1999. I had flown to the San Francisco area to do this training. And while I was back there, I sat down and was being trained through this process of what I now train, which is needs analysis. And in that training, there was a loan officer from the San Francisco Bay Area that was in the training as well. And he sat down with me, and what he asked me, now remember I said we want to be asking questions. He asked me to describe for him the ideal loan officer. Well, I had been in the business about 3 years, I guess maybe even 4 years at that point. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, you want to know what the ideal loan officer looks like? This is what it looks like. And I just pounded out, like, they're not going to tell me that the loan's ready when it's not ready. They're not going to tell me they're qualified if they're not qualified. They're going to update me on, like, I went through every single thing that I would expect the ideal loan officer to look like. Now, here's the thing. Keep in mind this. By me just telling them what the ideal loan officer sounded like or looked like, created in my mind that loan officer was that person, because he sat and listened to me. And because he sat and listened to me, I then felt safe with him, which leads to number 3. The third thing is, number 3 on this is trust. They've got to trust you. So the third thing that's got to happen is they have to trust you. Now, where does the trust come from is what we just talked about, is because of that loan officer asking me the questions and just listening. That's all he did. He didn't say, oh, that is what I do. All he did is sat and went, okay, yep, okay. By him just doing that while I sat and talked about, they're not going to tell me that they qualify if they don't qualify. They're going to keep me updated. They're not going to surprise me at the last second with, we need all these other documents from the buyer. Like, they're going to keep me informed. Because of him telling me all that, I then felt safe and felt like I could trust this loan officer. And the reason I felt like I could trust him is because he listened to me. So hopefully I'm driving this point home enough to you guys of, you've got to really slow down and listen to them. More important than what you're going to say next. See, because the problem is typically what happens with us in any conversation that you are having and any listing presentation or even a buyer presentation, we are so worried about the next thing that we're going to say that what happens is we don't listen to what they're telling us. And when we're not listening, they can tell you're not listening. Even if it may not be at a conscious level, unconsciously, they know you're not listening. If you will slow down and just listen to what they're telling you and acknowledge it, they're going to then feel safe, which allows them to feel like they can now trust you, which as they trust you then allows us to do the number 4 thing. So the 4th thing that's got to happen on any listing presentation, and again, this even goes for prospecting, that is you have got to create value. We have to create some value. Now, the way you're going to do that in terms of creating value is actually tied to what we've just been talking about. As you sit and listen to them and take some notes of what they're telling you and really acknowledge that you understand what they are talking about, is going to then create value for them. Now, the second piece of this, though, this creating value, is as you have listened to them, you can now then turn around and say to them, here's what I have heard, and here is what you're expecting, and let me tell you how I am going to meet those needs. See, that's what allows you to then create this value. So let me give you a story real quick on this that is related from back in that same training. So in that same training I was at, there was an agent who had been through this training before. And he started talking about, he was from Southern California. And you'll have to forgive me for our California friends, because I don't remember where, that was 20 years ago now. I don't remember where in California. But he talked about he had gotten an opportunity to go list a home that at that time was a $15 million home. So 20 years ago, $15 million home, probably worth 30 or 40 today. He got an opportunity to go do it, and he went in, and he had been trained on what we're talking about of these pieces. He went in and just said to the seller, tell me what's important about getting this home sold. Well, the seller starts sharing with them that they had interviewed a number of other agents, and every agent was talking about how many people they were going to bring through the house, and they were going to show it to their office, and they were going to get the board tour to come on it. All these people were going to come through the house. Well, this lady mentions to this agent, all I can picture is this white carpet that I have in there being destroyed. And so because of the agent listening to that and understanding what she was concerned with, the agent was then able to create value by saying, I'm actually not going to let anyone into your house unless they are pre-approved. We're only going to show it to approved people. And I'm going to go down and buy a box of booties, which I think a ton of us have been using now over the last few months. But I'm going to go buy this box of booties that we're going to have everybody put on as they walk through, so you don't have to worry about your carpet being destroyed. Well, guess who got the listing? That agent, over a $5 box of booties, because they actually sat and listened and they were able to create value. See, sometimes we think of creating value as, I've got to get this great story to tell to them. I've got to have all this wonderful information to throw up on them. And that's not what is going to create the value. What creates the value is stopping and listening to what they're saying and then showing them how you're going to be able to meet that need that they are looking for. When you are able to do that, that creates the value. Now they see value in listing their home with you, which leads then to number 5. Number 5, which is related to creating value, but it is separate yourself. So you've got to separate yourself from your competition. And the way you're going to do that is through what I just said. It is saying, I'm going to go down and buy a box of booties for you to protect your carpet. I'm going to understand that you're worried about people coming through your home while your husband's been transferred out to another place. So here's what I'm going to do to take care of it. Like, it's finding out what their greatest fear or their greatest concern is. So back here in this asking questions stuff, we need to be asking questions that allow us to find out, what is your greatest fear? What is it that you're most concerned about in this transaction? And when they tell you what they're most concerned about, now I can then show them how I'm going to create value for them and separate myself by saying, let me tell you what I do. And the way you're going to do this in this separating yourself is, as you're presenting this to your sellers, you want to be saying, here is what most agents do, but this is how I work. So you're going to separate yourself by saying, most agents will do this. And so let's use that example on this $15 million property. Most agents are going to want to bring anybody and everybody through your home. That's not how I work. Instead, for me, I want to protect your asset. I want to make sure we only have people coming through your home who are qualified to buy your home. Because you know as well as I do, if we put a $15 million house out there, people are going to want to come see it just because they want to see a $15 million house. Well, that's not the way that I work. See, so that's how we separate ourselves, is you're going to say this, most agents do this, but I do this. That's how we separate ourselves. Most agents do this, but I handle it this way. All right, and then number 6. The number 6 thing that we have to do on this listing presentation is we have to close. So the number 6 thing that you do to get them to choose you is you have to close. Too many times, the idea of an agent's closing looks like this. So what do you think, Ruby? And that's not a close, by the way. And a good presentation, the natural ending is going to be a close. So meaning, you don't need all these different tricky closes and things. All you need to really be able to do, because again, I've got to get them to choose me before we've talked about the price. So at this point, we've still not talked price. And if they try to get me to talk about, well, what is the price? What's the commission going to be? Well, until we have a greater understanding of if you and I are even going to work together, I don't know what the commission is going to be. And so I'm going to take them through this process first. Once I have done that, the way I'm going to start on this close for me, then before we transition to price, is by just saying to them, hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, where do you feel like we are in terms of working together? And then anything that they tell me less than a 10 tells me they haven't 100% chosen me yet. So from there, what I need to do then is just to say, well, what would have to happen in order for us to get to me being a 10 on this scale of 1 to 10? And then they should tell you the only thing that is holding them back from signing a contract to work with you. And once they tell you that, now then you can just say, well, what if we did this? And I put together how I'm going to do it, which again should be separating myself. So then now they should be saying, well, yeah, if you can do that, then the way would be to a 10. Great. So then now let's go in and we would talk about price with them. After I've talked about price with them and we've come to an agreement on price, it's just a matter of the close at that point is a matter of ultimately just saying, so how soon did you want to get started? When did you want your home to hit the market? Or just saying, hey, I've got the paperwork here. How did you spell your last name? And write it out. See, we don't need necessarily a tricky close. If you have done all the rest of this stuff, hopefully, if you've done it right and they have chosen you to work with, before you even get to the closing, they're probably saying to you, so what do we need to do to get started? What's our next step? What do we need to do? See, the natural ending to a good presentation is just the close. And if it's done right, hopefully they're just asking you, hey, what do we need to do in order to get this taken care of? All right. Well, hopefully you've got that. So let me just run through just in case you can't see it or you can't read my writing. So number one, we got to create a connection or some rapport, which will allow them to feel safe. And once they feel safe, they now feel like they can trust me. Once they can trust me, I just have to create some value. And by creating the value, I'm going to then separate myself from everyone else out there. And then I just a matter of saying, hey, so when did you want to get started on getting your home sold? That's ultimately all there is to the listing presentation. I know that it's very simple, but isn't necessarily as easy and takes practice. So make sure you are practicing this, especially if you're a newer agent. You should be practicing at least once a week this listing presentation and really working on it. So at minimum once a week, you should be doing a listing presentation. All right. Hey, thanks for being with me today. Hopefully you got some value out of what we talked about. Go out and make it an awesome day. Go see if you can set some appointments that will allow you to go practice and do this on some real people. We're going to wrap it up now with our closing affirmation. So let me